So welcome. My name's Mike. I'm one of the clergy here at St. Michael and All Angels in Albuquerque, and I'm joined today by Kathy Bailey. And Kathy is a part of a process. She and another person here, Sharon DeLand, have been leading our local conversation here at St. Michael's about is it fair to call it diocesan discernment process? Kathy, how would you describe it?
Yes, it is a diocesan discernment process that really started a year and a half ago when we were invited into a conversation in the wider church around congregational and diocesan vitality. And I'm part of a leadership group in this diocese, in the Diocese of Rio Grande, called the Diocesan Vitality Initiative. And Bishop Hunt is part of that. J.P. Rosa is part of that. And I'm a lay member of that committee. So leadership really got together in January, and we're charged with developing a process of asking congregations, parishes, vicarages to really think through how our diocese, how the wider church really is seen in our personal lives as we journey through spirituality. And so that's what the questions are about. And we're just gathering information. So at this stage, we're just really getting a feel for how the diocese is functioning in this place and in our own hearts and minds as we go forward.
Yeah, and so the questions that you all had at the first forum, which are part of this wider conversation, were I got to participate in part of this on Sunday. It's often the case I get pulled in like 30 directions, but I was able to do the discussion, which was around tell a story about a moment that was a high point when you felt that the diocese or the wider Episcopal Church was doing God's work and fulfilling God's mission, what was happening, and then what are three things you value most about the Episcopal or Anglican tradition were the question. And I really enjoyed the conversation at my table. It was interesting. We were a mix of people. Some had been Roman Catholics, some of us had been lifelong Episcopalians, but they told stories about their time at St. Michael's or even like out beyond our church and what was valuable to them. How was your sense of like, and I understand there's an opportunity to keep answering these questions if people want, right?
Correct. So Sharon and I really talked about this because we knew we probably, it's summertime and lots of things are happening. And so we were hopeful that we would have maybe 10 people in the room, and there were more than that, which was very gratifying. But we wanted to really open it up to those folks who didn't get a chance to come on last Sunday morning and discuss these questions, these wider questions around values and experiences with the wider church, to everyone, knowing full well that the choir, for instance, couldn't be part of the discussion, and that there were perhaps people on vacation or people who are back in town now who might want to respond. And so to get as many responses as possible from our particular parish, because our parish is an important one in the lexicon of the diocese, but also in the work we do in the wider church. And so I think it's really important to capture St. Michael's experiences, both perhaps positive and perhaps negative, in terms of how we see our life in that wider community of faith that we all belong to, which is the Episcopalian Anglican tradition, Episcopalianism as a denomination. So I think that's why we're opening it up this week, and then we will do the same thing next week for people who can't make it on Sunday.
Yeah, and it's I'd say that's important because the way that this was framed from the bishop was he was hoping that congregations would, have a whole congregational meeting, almost like we do in January, and
Right.
everybody together. And I think that's easy when you're in a church where it's, 30 people on a Sunday, and it's just like, hey, everybody stick around and have a cup of coffee and we're going to talk about these things.
Exactly.
At a place like St. Michael's, where it's like 8 things are going on at any time.
Yes.
We even had to carve it into 2 sessions instead of just one, because
Right.
an hour and a half doesn't fit between our services.
Right.
What are you going to talk about this week?
So this week, we have 2 more conversations to have. It will be structured very much like we did on Sunday, with small table groups, allowing for each table group to to talk with one another about the questions. And one conversation will be about appreciation of the ministry of the Episcopal Church.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not just talking, and that may be at the parish level where we feel that ministry happening, but it may be, for instance, we're going to General Convention, and it may be the wider church's dialogue and discussion around racial justice and reconciliation, or it might be we are listening to marriage rights for this next triennium, and hopefully that will go through. It's no longer as controversial as it was 9 years ago, 12 years ago, and this is our final reading of that. And so I'm hoping that people have experienced wider church involvement, whether that's on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, or whether that's looking at the legislation that has been approved by the wider church for the work we do in this place, which I think is really around understanding the culture and place where we live and our neighbor in deeper, more meaningful ways. So that's one question. The next one, the last question is, imagining ourselves 5 years from now, 10 years from now. How do we see both our parish life and the life of the wider church remaining relevant to our culture here in the United States, but also that wider context, and how that's going to look? What might that look like? So a visioning piece about our church is changing and is being forced to change in many ways. And so what might it look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Might be very different than what it looks like now. And so really having people think about that question.
Yeah, the term comes to mind about radical honesty, right?
Yes.
One of the things that we had to do at a vestry level was, and not by name, but we had to create a chart of our pledges, like how people communicate to the church about their plan for giving for the year, and how much of our income comes from different age brackets.
Mm-hmm.
And every church in the diocese was asked to do that, in part because it's about the radical honesty about, are we in a situation where we're going to see significantly reduced income in years to come? And what is at stake if that is the case?
Right. And I think the other piece that's really important is to remember that we're all brothers and sisters, and that we're all connected. And so, while I'm hopeful in 5-10 years, St. Michael's is doing the ministry and mission that it's being called to do in the world, but it may look very different from a church, say, in Raton or Tucumcari, but that we're all part of the Diocese of the Rio Grande, and we're not becoming, the Diocese of I-25, so that we're valuing the whole community in an equal way, so that equity and justice piece is recognized and valued. So that's part of it. That's part of the conversation at the diocesan level, but it also, I think, has to move to the deaneries and to the parishes in terms of that recognition. And I think honesty is part of that conversation, because if we're not recognizing that, then we're not prepared for our heads in the sand. We're not prepared for that relational work that has to happen for us to be a connected body and doing the work of Christ in this place. So, and knowing who our neighbors are in deep ways, I think is going to change the nature of all of our churches. So it's a hopeful thing. It's an aspirational thing, but it starts with that honest piece, I think.
Yeah, well, and I think you pinged at this at the very beginning, but it's an interesting thing as St. Michael's to be invited into this process like this and to be valued. That's a change historically in our relationship to the diocese. But
Yes.
we're an important voice and it's important to hear from folks in this parish as the diocese starts to make its, as it seeks to discern what are the values that we're going to carry forward, what are the strategic decisions we need to make around how we are going to continue the work of this ministry going forward.
Exactly. And I think, that every place is valuable, but I think as our diocese knows, those of us that have been around, I've been around since birth, but those of us who've been around a while, know that in some ways we have been harmed by a lack of transparency, a lack of honesty, even at the leadership positions within this place. And so I think the Bishop Hunn's motives here are really about honest, open transparency around what will happen and how that happens, and not just a top-down sort of hierarchical model, but really looking at a collaborative, creative, generative process as we move into our future together. So St. Michael's is a huge part of that. And so honoring the voice of this place is really important.
So we would encourage you, if you can, come at 10:15 on Sunday morning between the services, stay around after 9 o'clock or come early for 11:15 and be a part of part 2 of our discussion about the diocese. And if you can't be there live in person, whether you're in the 11:15 choir or you're off in Minnesota for the summer or something, take a look in the eNoticias this week. The questions that Kathy mentioned are posted. They're also up at our website, stmichaelsabq.org/info. Send Kathy your responses so that you can be a part of the responses that we collate and bring to the wider diocese as they do some important work of discernment. Kathy, thank you. Thanks for having a brief conversation with me, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday and talking more about the life of the Episcopal Church.